Shot. Okay, the parting shot is still coming up. Let's listen to the credits in the meantime.
Hi, BTA listeners. This is Agima Tebola from Mukobani Village at Limpopo, Malawi. I'd like to thank our team today, Andisa, Temba, Tabiso, Patrick, Vusi, Captain, my Captain Aldrin. What a good show as always. Captain, you are doing a good job with your team. Big up, man. That's why we are nominated. This is Agima Tebola.
Beyond the Headline on SAfm.
I'm falling deeper, 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 deeper to your love. I'm falling harder, 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 harder than before.
Beyond the Headline on SAfm.
And our parting shot today is from Steve Maroboli, who once said, life doesn't get easier or more forgiving. We get stronger and more resilient. The longer you live, the stronger you get. Always remember how powerful you are. And the song that's playing in the background is Holly Ray, Deeper. And remember to love each other and lead with compassion. Since enjoy the rest of your evening and enjoy the weekend.
Would you hold me now? I'm falling deeper, 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 deeper to your love. I'm falling harder, 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 harder than before. I'm falling deeper, 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 deeper to your love. I'm falling harder, 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 harder than before. Hey, 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 give me your love. Hey, 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 give me your love. I think it's time to let you know.
BCX is one of Africa's leading systems integrators. For over 40 years, we have strived to develop and implement the technology solutions businesses need to thrive.
Independent and impartial. This is SAfm News.
10 people killed in KZN crash and US reviews Zim sanctions. Good evening. 10 people, including 8 learners, have died in a crash on the N2 near Pongola in northern KwaZulu-Natal. The Provincial Emergency Rescue Services spokesperson, Robert McKenzie, says the crash involved a truck and a bakkie that was transporting learners.
There has been a serious and tragic crash on the N2 highway between Pongola and Estelle-Juba in northern KZN. The crash involves a truck and a bakkie that had been transporting school children. Emergency services are still at the scene of the crash. At this stage, initial reports from the scene indicate that tragically 10 people have sustained fatal injuries in this crash. The fatally included 8 children and 2 adults. 1 child has also sustained critical injuries and has been transported to hospital.
In another crash involving Scala transport in the province, 13 people have been injured after a collision between a delivery vehicle and a Scala taxi on the N2 near the old Durban airport. Traffic has been affected on the N2 southbound. Emergency Med spokesperson Carl van Reenen.
At this point in time, we can confirm that as many as 12 children have been left with injuries ranging from minor to moderate, and 1 adult patient from the light delivery vehicle has been left with moderate injuries. Multiple emergency service agencies are on scene, and traffic in the area is severely affected. We advise motorists to please use alternative routes and allow emergency services to clear the scene.
An ANC councillor from the Mapamula municipality north of Durban has been killed. He's the third councillor to be killed in the province in 2 weeks. Zakele Kuzwayo was killed in the Notwane area. Police spokesperson Jay Naika.
Mapamulu police were called out to a scene of a murder at Notwane area. It's alleged that at the scene they found the body of a 48-year-old man who was shot and killed whilst in his vehicle. The deceased had sustained multiple gunshot wounds. A case of murder was opened at Mapamulu SAPS for further investigation.
Advocate Dalian Mpofu says efforts to stop the public protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane from going back to work are tantamount to attempts to resuspend her after the court ruled her suspension invalid. He's arguing in the Western Cape High Court that she be allowed to return to office while waiting for the Con Court to confirm the High Court's decision. He says by being prevented from returning to office, Mkhwebane is suffering harm as she isn't able to perform the duties for which she was appointed. The Maluti Apafong local municipality in the Free State has apologized to residents of Harrismith for the inconvenience caused during repairs of cable faults at one of their substations. Municipal spokesperson Thabo Kesa.
The mini substation in Harrismith was vandalized last week on Monday, the 5th of September. Subsequent to that, it was fixed just to get it running temporarily whilst waiting for parts from Johannesburg. Unfortunately, it only operated for about 2 hours, after which it went off, and then as we are speaking now, we are still busy with the repairs, and we hope this will be done in the next few days.
The U.S. has reviewed its sanctions in Zimbabwe. It's delisted 11 individuals from the specially designated nationals list. These individuals have been deemed to no longer undermine Zimbabwe's democratic processes. The Zimbabwe sanctions program targets human rights abusers and those who undermine democratic processes and facilitate corruption. Kaelikhle Khumalo reports.
The U.S. State Department says its sanctions in Zimbabwe don't target the Zimbabwean people or the country's banking sector. Each year, the U.S. government removes hundreds of individuals and entities from the sanctions list following a thorough review. The U.S. has designated Zimbabwean Deputy Police Commissioner Stephen Mutamba for undermining democratic processes and institutions. Washington, D.C. further says it stands ready to work with Harare against corruption, human rights abuses, and won't hesitate to designate those who undermine democracy. Kaelikhle Khumalo, SABC News, Johannesburg.
The top story is that 10 people, including 8 learners, have died in a crash on the N2 near Pongola in northern KwaZulu-Natal. That's SAfm News. I'm Greg Khos.
Reimagine evolution. Contact BCX today to find out how we can give your business the power to grow. bcx.co.za. BCX is one of Africa's leading systems integrators. We have the expertise, skills, and experience to deliver the technology your business needs to digitally transform. From mining, oil, gas, and financial services to commerce, healthcare, telecoms, retail, and the public sector. We connect businesses across the continent, securely providing the technology and services that enable them to create, innovate, and reimagine how they serve their customers. Find out how we can give your business the power to grow. Visit bcx.co.za.
As we're celebrating unity in our diversity this year, let us remember our rich cultural heritage and use it to continue building our wonderful nation. SAfm celebrates Heritage Month. Oliver Dickson on SAfm.
Yeah, when somebody says, yo, White is dead, I just feel that my youth is gone forever, and then I get very sad. I just feel like crying.
You don't like that idea.
How did I get here? How did I leave that youth and I'm now here, and then they say White is dead? But I understand that we go with the times, things change, the genre somehow needs to come up with something. Like he said, the last caller, like he said, it's still the same thing, but we just evolve with time, you understand? But I just think the custodians, the people who started this genre, if they really wanted to see it going forth, like your ASA, your MDU, your TEDE. Maybe they could school people as to how to keep it going. You understand? Instead of just us letting it die out.
SAfm has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. PO Box 142365. Craig Hall 2024. Fax to 011-326-3198 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za.
Oliver Dickson on SAfm.
It is 7 minutes after 6 o'clock, and it is a Friday. You're listening to This Week Today. My name is Oliver Dickson. Again, a pleasure to be in your company all the way up until 7 this evening as we bring you critically important conversations that shapes our body politic, shapes our democracy, and impacts our daily lived experience as South African citizens, as global citizens. Of course, the show is coming to you live from the SABC studios in Auckland Park on 104 to 107 FM, but we're also streaming live to you, and you can find us on any of our platforms. It is just simply at SAfm Radio. You can find us on YouTube. You can watch this there. You can also watch the show on Facebook as well as on Twitter, where we stream the show live. Do also tweet me directly at Oliver_speaking, and you can find me on Facebook. It is simply Oliver Dickson over there. If you want to give us a call throughout the show, on any of the conversations we'll be having this evening, the number is 086 000 2032, 086 000 2032, and we're taking your WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107. Let me quickly tell you what's coming up on the show today. Last week, Friday, just as we came onto the show, Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane received judgment in the Western Cape High Court with regards to her application to overturn her suspension by Cyril Ramaphosa. And she found favor in the court, and the court ordered that the suspension be reversed, overturned effectively. And since then, over the weekend and across the week, various litigation has various applications for certain litigation has happened. The president is appealing. The deputy public protector has gotten involved. The Democratic Alliance is getting involved in appealing, and the public protector is cross-appealing an appeal. It's litigiously messy, and we need to be able to make sense of it. Today, in court, Advocate Dalimpofu, arguing on behalf of Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, argued that the High Court's order be implemented immediately and that Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane be able to return to work. This after she got in touch with the Office of the Public Protector, got in touch with the CEO of the Office of the Public Protector and say, hey, can you guys prepare some stuff for me? I'm coming into work. And apparently that just never happened. She was told she can't come into work because the Office of the Public Protector had been made aware of appeals. And therefore, ostensibly, that means that the order of the Western Cape High Court no longer stands until the appeal processes are complete. The urgent application that Dalimpofu argued for today in court was that the order of the Western Cape High Court be implemented immediately without delay and prejudice. That is a discussion we're going to be having right now with Mbegezeli Benjamin, who's a research and advocacy officer at Judges Matter. And then later on in the show, we'll be joined by the Deputy Minister of Health, Dr. Sibongiseni Dhlomo, as well as Priyashni Pandit Subrayan, who is a technical director for TB at the Aurum Institute. Over 1 million children in South Africa, 1 million children worldwide have been diagnosed with TB just in 2020 alone. In fact, the numbers in South Africa are quite staggering, that children under the age of 5 are vulnerable with high death rates as a result of TB. TB kills, and this is an important piece of information. TB is the number one killer in South Africa. Every 9 minutes, 2 people die from TB. Every 9 minutes, 2 people die from tuberculosis. Why is this such a big problem? How do we solve it? In fact, data tells us that TB has a strong correlation with poverty, and that it disproportionately impacts people who are poor and remote.
Why is TB so prevalent in rural South Africa, such as the Eastern Cape, such as KZN, such as Limpopo? What is to be done? The TB conference, the South Africa TB conference, took place in Durban this week. Hopefully solutions would have come up. Today, the Minister of Health, Joe Pahla, addressed the conference, and the Deputy Minister will be joining us to speak about what some of the key interventions should be and will be to be able to mitigate the impact of TB and to, I guess, support the fight against tuberculosis in South Africa. If you are vulnerable to TB, if you have lived with TB, if you have loved ones who have lost their lives to TB, if you're concerned about the problem, give us a call. The number to dial is 086 0002032. You can send us a WhatsApp voice note on 0614104107, and you can tweet me at Oliver_speaking at SAfm Radio. You can tweet us, find us there, and you can just watch the show live as well. On the other side of this, we speak to our first guest, Mbegazeli Benjamin, who's a research and advocacy officer at Judges Matter.
Giving you new perspectives and information with deep dive expert analysis of the biggest stories that shaped your world this week.
Mbegazeli, thank you so much for your time this evening. Really, really do appreciate it. Let's start here. It's easy to lose track of the various litigations taking place in the matter between the public protector and the president of the country. What? Paint the picture for us. Slow it down. Cut out the noise. What is actually happening? Mbegazeli, I think you might be muted. Let's see if we can get you unmuted so that we can hear you very, very clearly. Are you with us?
Yes. Can
there
you
we
hear
go.
me now?
Much clear. Very clear. Go ahead.
I'm sorry about that. I was listening to you earlier, Oliver, explaining the appeals and cross appeals and the back and forth. So it is quite complicated in terms of what exactly is happening. But just to summarize it, as you said last week, the High Court of the Western Cape set aside the president's suspension of Advocate Mkhwebane, and they found that suspension to have been invalid. Now, there is a debate now of whether or not it should go to the Constitutional Court, and there seems to be some agreement that the case should now go to the Constitutional Court for confirmation. But what the DA did in between, they said, as an abundance of caution, we will file an appeal, just so that we stop the operation of the Western Cape High Court's order. And the president also filed an appeal. So that is what has been happening this week. And then in between that, the public protector also applied for the immediate operation of that court order by the Western Cape High Court last week. And that is the hearing that is happening as we speak right now in the Western Cape High Court. So in summary, the public protector has got a partial victory against the president, and it's now waiting confirmation with the Constitutional Court. In the meantime, she wants to go back to work, and that is what the Western Cape High Court must still decide right now.
Under what circumstances would the High Court, especially if it's not acting as an appeals court, grant an order for its order to be implemented immediately? What's the criteria for that?
So we look to Section 18 of the Superior Courts Act of 2013, and Section 18 explains that there are two grounds that you need to show for a court order to operate immediately despite an appeal. The first ground is that you must show exceptional circumstances. So you must show that the situation is so exceptional that you can't wait for an appeal. The second ground is that if you wait until the appeal goes ahead and is finalized, you will suffer irreparable harm. So that means even after the appeal is granted or your whatever decision is in your favor is confirmed on appeal, it means that you would have suffered so much harm that it would really be irreplaceable.
Yeah.
And then irreparable. The third ground is usually they also look at the other side. What harm will they suffer if they wait for the appeal or if the court order is immediately operated or it's put into operation? So that is currently the debate. The public protector is saying that this case is exceptional because it involves the head of a Chapter 9 institution. They are also saying that The irreparable harm is that the public protector will stay out of office for much longer than she needs to, but also that there will be some derailing of the Phala Phala investigation. The DA, on the other hand, is saying, no, there is no irreparable harm on the public protector. She's been on suspension for the last 3 months, so it won't make much difference for her to continue to be on suspension for a bit longer. But also the Phala Phala investigation, which she is concerned about, seems to be continuing. And that also is bolstered by what the Deputy Public Protector put in an affidavit at the Western Cape High Court. So essentially, they are fighting over the application of Section 18 of the Superior Courts Act.
Yeah. An interesting argument that I read today by Professor Pierre de Vos from UCT was an argument that the court misread the facts, right? And I'll tell you what the argument is, and then we can debate this because it speaks to the merit of the case. He said, by design, the office of the president is one that will always act in bias, and therefore the court cannot reasonably find that the president there were reasonable apprehension of bias, that you can't hold the president to the same standard as you would a judge, an unelected official. The president is an elected official, and should it be that the president acts in bias, that the president should be held accountable by the electorate, not by the court, and therefore by design the president in its executive power can make discretionary decisions that always is informed by bias. That is an argument a non-litigating person made. I'm not sure. I haven't read the appeal papers of the Democratic Alliance, but they too, in their heads, made the argument that the court misfound this idea of bias, that there was no bias, right? That the president was merely executing something that he had the executive authority to do so, and that the law gave him the right to do so. Those are two different arguments. What do you think the consideration is going to be at appeal?
Well, on appeal, there will be an analysis of two things. It will be analysis of the facts and analysis of the law. So what Professor de Vos was debating and discussing in his piece was the legal considerations. Under what circumstances may a decision of the president be overturned by a court? And what Professor de Vos was saying is that the court, in fact, misunderstood its role in terms of the test for bias on the part of the president. So it was a legal debate. But what the DA and specifically the president in his appeal papers is saying is that the court was incorrect on the facts. They misread the facts. They only looked at the dates between the 7th of June and the 10th of June, which is a very narrow window to make a decision that the president's decision to suspend Public Protector Mkhwebane was informed by improper motives or some sort of bias. They say that if you look at the facts starting from the 17th of March, which is a wider scope or wider window, when you look at that picture, it becomes very clear that the suspension was a long time coming. It started off with a letter from the speaker, and then there was a letter by the president to the public protector to say, give me reasons why I shouldn't suspend you. And then it was followed by another letter in May, and then finally the public protector on the 26th of May made submissions to the president. And then in between, the Phala Phala issue only arose at the beginning of June, about 2 months after this process had already been underway. So
how much of that argument will actually pass in court? Because it's not like the judgment and the court didn't speak to that in its judgment, right? It, in fact, quite did directly speak to that. If I recall this correctly, the court argued in the judgment that it's not, conclusive that the suspension was a long time coming. The president may well have considered the public protector's arguments about why she should not be suspended, because he asked her to give reasons why she should not be suspended, and may well have found them to be good reasons and would have kept her in office, right? The specific nature of the president acting in that window before the court judgment came out, pending on that very issue, and right after the president sent the public protector sent the president questions on Phala Phala, within that very narrow window of 2 days that the president act on this particular issue, when he could have acted before, or he could have just waited a day or two longer after the court judgment and then acted based off of what the court judgment said, which was that, go ahead, you have the right to suspend her, that there's no real bias in this issue. But the court, of course, wasn't in a position to consider Phala, which happened after the argumentations were made before the court. It seems like the DA is rebutting an argument that is already answered in the judgment.
Well, I don't think that the judgment itself speaks to a lot of detail, and that's one of the big things that is causing a lot of the debate, is that the judgment itself, it just concludes to say, look, on a reading of this fact, of these facts, of the action of the president after the public protector sent the 31 questions, then there was no other possible conclusion than to say that he is biased. But of course, the president is arguing that no, it was simply coincidental, because it was simply coincidental that the president issued the letter of suspension the day before the judgment, because they say he didn't know by the time he signed the letter of suspension. It was then that the court announced that the judgment would be handed down the next day. So there was a debate about that.
Yeah, and I don't mean to drag you into a black hole of arguing the actual case, but it seems to me that the court answered that too and said, but wait, it was an urgent application. You knew that a judgment was coming. The court, in fact, the judge at the conclusion of argumentation said to you guys, this will take a week, at most 2 weeks. This won't take very long. It seems that the president was impatient, is what the judgment argues. There's no other reason for why the president couldn't wait when he knew that the judgment was going to come out any day now.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point to raise against the president, why he chose to act at the time that he did. And that is something I think the constitutional courts will really grapple with a lot in terms of the appeal, because now the president would have to really explain in some detail why he acted on that particular day. For me, when I read just what the circumstances are and the sequence of events, to me it makes no sense why the president chose to act on that day, and that's something that will be taken up with him. Yeah,
just one, maybe an important part before we take some engagement from our listeners. Why is it important, Mbegazeli, that legally that the Constitutional Court confirms the High Court's order before the order becomes implementable?
Well, it's important for two reasons. The first is because the Constitution says so. It says that any order that says that the conduct of the president is unlawful has to be confirmed by the Constitutional Court, and that's in terms of Section 172(2) of the Constitution. But also, I think it speaks to a point that you had earlier mentioned about the power of democratic institutions in the form of the president versus the judiciary. It is not a small thing for the unelected court to overturn a decision of an elected president. It's a big deal all over the world. It's a big deal in constitutional law all over the world. Constitutional law scholars have this headache. That's why it's important that the apex court has the final word on this. The apex court should be the one to have the final pronouncement on whether the president acted unlawfully, whether the president violated the Constitution, and if so, to what extent he did, and what kind of remedial measures can be put in place. So I think on a broader constitutional point, it's important for that, but also because the actual text of the Constitution says that the Constitutional Court must have the final say.
Thank you so much for that explanation, because it leads me to my next question on specifically that. How much ground is there to argue in appeal, as Pierre de Foster in his column, that this was a classic case of judicial overreach?
I think I wouldn't say it's judicial overreach. That is too strong a point to make. But what I would say is the court did seem to misdirect itself on quite crucial points of constitutional law and constitutional interpretation, and so that is something that I think the Constitutional Court is important to clarify. What is the proper role of the test for bias, for example, because that is something that for judicial officers, the test is quite clear. But for executive decision makers, we don't have that kind of test in our law. So the Constitutional Court needs to clarify that, because what has happened now is that it does seem that the High Court has misdirected itself.
But Mbekazeli, did the Constitutional Court not settle the jurisprudence on bias when it told Jacob Zuma that indeed Thuli Madonsela was right? You're biased. You can't make the decision about who leads the State Capture Commission.
Well, that was a slightly different set of facts, because there it wasn't necessarily bias, but it was a conflict of interests. I think that's the point that was raised in that Nkandla judgment, to say the president is the subject of the investigation of the commission. So there is some sort of conflict between his own interests of being investigated and his public interest or his public role as the appointer of the Commissioner of Inquiry. Yeah. So that was the issue there. But on bias, I don't think that was the issue that arose.
It seems to me like a similar set of facts. The court effectively told Jacob Zuma, you can't have the luxury of appointing your own investigator in something where you will be investigated. Seemingly, Ramaphosa wanted the luxury of determining who gets to investigate an investigation that he is party to, as the court argued in this instance. In that instance, I think the facts might be similar. But maybe I should ask you this. In law, is there a difference? Is there a conceptual distinction between bias and conflict of interest? I have always thought of them to be interchangeable.
No, there is quite a distinct difference between conflicts of interest and bias. So, for example, a conflict of interest is, let's say you have a particular, let's say you're paid by the public protector. For
argument's sake, yeah.
Yes, you're paid by the public protector, and then you have to come on an SAfm and pretend as if you don't have any interest in that. But the way you go around that is you declare upfront before we have the conversation to say, hey, I was paid by the public protector and this is something I'm putting on the table. We can then decide that, look, this doesn't really affect your decision making, and so you can go ahead and make the decision. So in that situation, bias doesn't arise because you have disclosed your conflicts of interest. But bias is a much more serious thing than just a mere conflict of interest. The bias goes to the exact decision that you have to take.
Right.
Bias means that you cannot apply an independent mind in the decision making. So the bias is, you could say, it goes much further than just a conflict of interest. It really affects the way that you make the decision, and ultimately the kind of decision, the quality of the decision that comes out.
Yeah. Let's take a couple of engagements, some of your voice notes. Get those voice notes in on 0614-104-107. Send us your voice notes, your comments, your questions on this conversation about the ongoing battle between the public protector and the president. 0614-104-107. We're also taking your calls on 086 000 2032, 086 000 2032, and your tweets at Oliver_speaking on Twitter, Oliver Dickson on Facebook. Let's have a listen to some of your voice notes.
Hi, Oliver. Can you please find out, I don't understand, what is the point of Busisiwe Mkhwebane going back into office when all that the president has to do is just delegate that suspension function to either the deputy president or to, the Minister of Justice, so that he can just reinstate that suspension in a matter of days. So I don't understand what really Busisiwe Mkhwebane is trying to achieve there. Thanks, Farai.
Good day to you, Oliver. If we look at the amount of the costs, the legal costs for litigations for and against the public protector, these could be better spent on more urgent needs like water and housing, especially for the flood victims of KZN. And this seems to continue, and one must ask the question, why was the public protector recently suspended rather than much earlier on if there were grounds, reasonable grounds to do so. And this is now entailed that there is a divide on the political front, and there is opportunistic wangling and dangling in order to achieve political mileage out of this. So this is my view. Thanks, Frank Maritzburg.
Hi, Oliver. I think bias is the act, whereas conflict of interest is the situation. Good evening, Oliver. Yeah, really great discussion about the public protector and the suspension. I was just wondering, because the president appoints the public protector and he is now suspending her, so she's going to court to unsuspend herself. Do you think we could, when the president appoints the wrong minister that the public doesn't like, do you think they can go to court and have that person unappointed? Because this actually opens the door to other things.
At SAfm Radio and at Oliver_speaking on Twitter.
Mbekazile, that last voice note is quite interesting. How much limitation could this judgment potentially impose on the executive authority of the president? I ask this because the scenario that the last voice note paints has been tried before. When Zuma fired Pravin Gordhan, the Democratic Alliance petitioned the court to declare that the removal of Pravin Gordhan as irrational and unconstitutional. So it's not a new thing in our political lawfare. But how much of what's currently being litigated will determine the power of the president in relation to appointing and suspending, in relation to the executive power that the president holds towards Chapter 9 institutions?
So there is a long-standing constitutional principle that we have in our law, which is that all public power and all the exercises of public power, which is decision-making, must be rational. That is the test. So there must be a rational connection between the decision and the ultimate end. So for just as a legal principle, the president's powers must be rational, and that is what that Gordhan case tried to find out, and what this decision is also about: the rationality of the president's decision making. What this judgment, whatever the outcome will be, what it will do in our law is simply give us more detail about how that principle of rationality applies, especially in relation to the suspension of the heads of Chapter 9 institutions, particularly the public protector. We can also include the Auditor General, the Electoral Commission, and the Human Rights Commission. So what this case will do is will give us a little bit more color as to what rationality in the decisions of the executive look like.
Right. One of the earlier, and this is not a legal question, but it's perhaps do speak to it as a pressure group advocate and advocacy officer. One of the earlier questions was, this seems like an inordinate waste of money that could be spent elsewhere. How important is this litigation for our democratic development?
It is extremely important. Like I said, it will create legal principles that will guide the decision-making of the president going forward, especially in relation to rationality. Whether we could have done it cheaper, perhaps. I think we could have done it cheaper. Maybe the public protector could have decided on a leaner team of advocates instead of having a big team of lawyers. I don't know where the costs would have been cut, but I don't think we could have avoided spending this money. And I think it's good money spent at the end, because we will have a clear legal principle to guide future decision making, especially in relation to the president and his powers.
Yeah. In this litigation, what's next?
So like I said, what's next now is for the Constitutional Court to have that final say. It is that court ultimately that will tell us whether the president suspended the public protector for unlawful reasons or in an unlawful manner. And ultimately, it will tell us what the line of march going forward, what is the legal principle that will be established going forward. So I think that is the next step for now.
All of this seems to be happening on an urgent basis. One, is that true and correct? And two, how does that impact what the timeline looks like in terms of this being resolved? This question matters because one of the arguments has to do with the fact that there's an ongoing investigation that the public protector needs to be a part of. There's a time limit on that. There's political pressure for a report to come out on that. And of course, the public protector's time, Advocate Busisiwe Mkhobane's time as public protector, is actually running out. I think she'll be vacating office next year, if my calculation serves me correct.
Well, there's one point that I do want to emphasize, Oliver, on this issue, which is that democratic institutions should never actually be reliant on a single individual. It should be that our institutions are so strong that they can operate even whoever the incumbent is. That is an important point that I want to make. So regardless of who is the incumbent in the public protector's office, we should all have the confidence that that office will do a thorough job in investigating whoever holds an important public office in this country, whether it is the president, the minister, or even the mayor. We should have confidence that the public protector's office will do a thorough job in investigating that. So that's an important principle to put forward.
Yeah.
But in relation to the Phala investigation in particular, the acting public protector has put in an affidavit to say that that investigation is not affected in any way. It's still ongoing. Basically, the departure or the temporary departure of Advocate Mkhwebane has not affected that investigation, which I think is important for the confidence that we have in that institution.
Yeah.
But on the urgency point, it does seem that Advocate Mkhwebane is anxious to get back to work. So I think that will influence how fast the process of the Constitutional Court proceeds, and ordinarily it does take a couple of months. So already we're at the end of 2022. So the case would have likely been heard in early 2023, but those timelines might be brought forward because of the urgency of the situation. So we don't know what the capacity of the court is. It will just have to tell us.
Mbegazeli Benjamin, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
That is Mbegazeli Benjamin, who is a research and advocacy officer at Judges Matter. Complicated case. What do you make of it? Still taking your voice notes on that. 0614 104 107. Your reaction to these conversations are important. This public protector's office is quite literally that. It's for the public, to protect the public. And this is why this is an important conversation that you should be a part of. So give us that call. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side of this, we're going to be speaking to Priyashni Pandit Subrayan, who's a technical TB director at the Aurum Institute, as well as the Deputy Minister of Health, Dr. Sibongiseni Dlomo, to speak to the TB crisis in South Africa. Quite literally, I'm not exaggerating when I use the word crisis. Let's take a quick break. On the other side of this, we continue.
The Art of Everything with Bridget Masinga.
Alfie, Sipho, Mkwanazi.
Yeah, clever. Ufika ngikhathala khona lifestyle yakho has been too fast this couple of months.
We're talking all things content creating, and of course, most importantly, to the business of content creating.
Yeah.
So how did you get into content creation?
The video that really took everything by storm was when I said the day umkhaba wami uphela. It was from there, and everything just, blossomed from there, and everyone was just like, yeah.
Because now you arguably one of the biggest content creators in the country, if not on the continent.
The Art of Everything with Bridget Masinga. Friday, 8 p.m. till midnight. As we're celebrating unity in our diversity this year, let us remember our rich cultural heritage and use it to continue building our wonderful nation. SAfm celebrates Heritage Month.
SAfm has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. PO Box 142365, Craig Hall 2024. Fax to 011-326-3198 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za.
Giving you new perspectives and information with deep dive expert analysis of the biggest stories that shaped your world this week.
Every 9 minutes, 2 people in South Africa die from tuberculosis. It's the number one killer in South Africa. The number one killer. We don't speak about tuberculosis very often. Neither do we discuss why the problem is prevalent and what we should be able to do to mitigate against it. Where is the problem? Why are so many people dying from a curable disease? Very curable. Why is it that we do not have the necessary interventions to be able to mitigate against it? By the way, people who are vulnerable to this are particularly people who are socioeconomically disadvantaged. In other words, poor people, people in rural South Africa, people who are disadvantaged by this are people who do not have the necessary measures to protect themselves. And children under 5 fall into that vulnerable category. This is heartbreaking, incredibly heartbreaking. But the South African Tuberculosis Conference took place in Durban this week. Hopefully some solutions came forward. Joining me to have this discussion is Priyashni Pandit-Subrayan, who's the Technical TB Director at the Aurum Institute, as well as Dr. Sibongiseni Dlomo, who's the Deputy Minister of Health. Priyashni, I'm going to start with you. Describe to us the nature of the problem and why this is, in 2022, a problem in South Africa.
Yes, thank you. And that is really an incredibly important question. TB has been around for decades. In fact, it's been around for many, many years. And, some say that unlike HIV, TB is not as sexy. But the problem is that it's just that many people don't think that they have TB, so they're not concerned. There's no doubt that TB disproportionately affects poorer communities, but let us also not forget that it can affect anyone, irrespective of our social state. I think what is worth noting, however, because it affects our most vulnerable, medical interventions alone is not the only answer. And we really need to engage our communities, engage our patients, and tailor our responses to them. So the social determinants of health play a key role, and this cannot be done.
Yeah. Deputy Minister, I want to bring you in here. How much thinking and resources has government dedicated towards understanding the nature of the problem to be able to inform perhaps policy interventions to mitigate against our tuberculosis crisis? Dr. Dlomo?
Hello.
Hi, Deputy Minister. Go ahead. Now we can hear you.
Yeah. What question were you raising?
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that you didn't hear my question. How much thinking and resources has government dedicated towards understanding the nature of our TB crisis to be able to determine the vulnerabilities and really come to an answer as to why it is that it's such a prevalent disease? Hopefully that will inform policy interventions, if at all.
Yeah, no, if one were to put of the minister.
Sorry, Deputy Minister, your line is not very great. Can I ask that you just move around a little bit and maybe try speak to that again? Your line was breaking and cutting terribly over there.
How is it now? I don't know whether you are able to hear me.
Much better. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think if you can borrow from the contribution that were made by the minister in his closing remarks, that it's time for COVID-19 to pay back to TB. You know, the way we have done and accelerated the interventions and campaigns on the COVID-19 has really made us as a country, as the world, to have fewer deaths, and we are almost on the control of COVID-19. Of course, at the expense of many other programs that we kept at a bay, and then.
Oh, Deputy Minister, your lines. Sorry, Deputy Minister, I'm going to have to pause you there. Your line's cutting very terribly again. Let's see if we can get you on a better line so that we can hear you much, much, much clearer. Priyashni, I want to ask this. One of the problems.
I was going to say I'm happy to also continue the conversation because I was there, and we, as the TB think tank, we work very closely with the Department of Health. And right now, there is a policy that was talked about quite extensively at the TB conference. It's called the Recovery Plan. It's our National TB Recovery Plan, and it really aims to reverse the losses incurred by the TB program and TB services in South Africa during the COVID-19 pandemic and the associated lockdown, as well as to accelerate, the efforts towards attaining our NSP, our SDG, and end TB target. The focus of the plan is really across the cascade of care, cuts across the entire cascade of care when it comes to TB, aiming to find people with undiagnosed TB in communities, strengthening the linkage of people diagnosed with TB to treatment, strengthening retention in TB care as well as prevention efforts. So as you can see, there's an entire bouquet of interventions, all evidence-based, that the National Department of Health with the TB think tank have put together, and that's really our plan to bolster TB and get back the control of the TB control program in South Africa.
What will it take to get there, Priyashni? Why are we not there just yet? Is it a resource crisis?
So, one of the great things in South Africa is that we have very progressive policy. Where we are failing is often in the implementation. And it's really about strengthening our health systems so that we can ensure we are able to implement all these robust policies and guidance, as well as all the new interventions. You'll see that the plan even talks to shortening drug regimens so that we can improve treatment adherence, particularly for drug-resistant TB. I mean, this was, we currently have an oral regimen, so there's no injections. Previously, it was almost a 24-month treatment for patients with very poor outcomes, but now we're looking at just 6 months of treatment. This is the same as our drug-sensitive TB treatment. So really great advances, which we need to ensure that our health systems are strong enough to be able to implement.
Give us a call. The number is 086 0002032, 086 0002032. Taking your WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107. Priyashni, I want to take it here. I mean, earlier on I mentioned that TB disproportionately affects people who are socioeconomically vulnerable, but you said that anyone can get TB, and that's a medical fact, right? It's a scientific fact. But it's irresistible to try and zoom in on the fact that most people with TB happen to be South Africans who are disenfranchised. Why is it that TB disproportionately affects the disenfranchised?
Well, kind of going along with patients that are vulnerable, there are other issues that complicate and further decrease their immunity, like nutritional issues. These are people who are, in poverty and they don't have the means and way to ensure adequate nutrition. We have, populations and age groups that are almost immediately vulnerable, children less than 5, those that are above 60 years, etc. And in addition, South Africa has one of the highest incidence of HIV in the world, and that additionally places a burden and, increases susceptibility to TB.
Yeah, it's incredible that you mentioned nutrition because and children under 5 being vulnerable, because child hunger in South Africa is an actual real crisis linked to food security and their interventions towards that. How much of the TB mitigation plan or the recovery plan, as you spoke about, is interlinked to other non-medical functionaries to be able to make sure that the fight against TB is an adequate one? So I can't imagine that the Department of Health, with its social and business partners, would be the only driver of the implementation of this when people are hungry. Right, that means that the Department of Social Development has a role to play there as well, and its social partners. How much of this will be a multidisciplinary approach?
No, you're absolutely right. It is a multi-sectoral response, and I'm very glad to say that not only our Deputy Minister of Health attended the conference during the entire duration of the conference, but also our Deputy Minister of Social Development was there, and it was really great to see the acknowledgement that we can't just, it is not just the Department of Health problem.
Yeah.
It's beyond this, and a multi-sectoral response is what is required. Even, and not just the Department of Social Development, but also engaging the private sector so that GPs and medical aides can also get on board and avoid further delays, ensuring the diagnosis and treatment of patients who need it and who have TB.
Yeah, this is obviously a South African approach, but there are other organizations across the world also looking at TB in different parts of the world. How much of South Africa's efforts is plugged into the global effort?
Sorry, how much of?
How much of South Africa's intervention is plugged into the global effort to fight TB? This is obviously not just a South African problem. I ask that because you are with the Aurum Institute, which is a global institute.
Yes, so TB is one of, in South Africa, as one of the highest, people in South Africa as one of the highest incidents of TB. And it is a huge problem, not just in South Africa, but sub-Saharan Africa. And the additional problem with co-infection of HIV further places us on a back foot. So currently, our ranking ranges from about 8 amongst the top high burden countries. So South Africa is about 8, if I remember the last WHO status. And so we contribute, fairly significant to the global burden of TB.
Yeah.
However, the TB in South Africa is very different from the TB in other countries like India. And we see a lot more HIV positive TB as opposed to the rest of the world.
That is incredible. To borrow COVID-19 language, right, and the epidemiological language we used over there, are there different variants and strains of TB? I didn't imagine there would be.
No, not as such. It's just that because we have, prior to HIV, South Africa was actually on the way to getting better control of TB. And as the HIV epidemic surged, we saw this massive acceleration in the incidence of TB. So HIV really accelerated our TB problem, and hence we are sitting with the problem that we have currently. And HIV program has made great strides. But where we need to strengthen the HIV program right now is the losses we have with patients that we've initiated, but now are falling out of care. Because what happens to these patients is that they inevitably end up in our hospitals with, severe immune suppression and disseminated TB, which contributes to our high TB mortality. Hence, TB is the number one cause of death amongst people living with HIV.
Have these social and lived experiences of TB, was it discussed at the conference this week? Because TB often immobilizes people and causes various disabilities, and its impact can put an end to somebody's ability to be laborious and productive. And I don't know if we make the distinction between TB and silicosis, but it seems to have a similar impact, that you may not be able to have a job due to the impact of TB in your life, and therefore special interventions to that extent, non-medical interventions, are important. How much of that was discussed this week?
It was one of the key threads in the entire conference. This shared living experience of the TB patient. And that's why even when you look at the interventions that form part of the TB recovery plan, a lot of them are focused on being patient-centric and putting the patient at the center of the care. So understanding that, gone are the days when it's just about dispensing medication and expecting patients to swallow. But it's about understanding that patients cannot always make it to the clinic. And we have differentiated models of care where we take the treatment to patients, bring it closer to them for easier access. We have external pickup points with the ARV programs, and we want to ensure that that's even utilized for the TB program as well.
Yeah.
So we are trying as much as possible within the healthcare department and in healthcare to put our patient at the center and understand and appreciate that, life happens.
Yeah.
And they might not always be able to respond in every way that we want to and we need them to. But at the minimum, they need to know, what does this journey look like with TB?
Yeah.
And like HIV, there's a start and there's an end date.
Yeah. Do we have an awareness crisis when it comes to TB in South Africa? And if we do, how big of a crisis is it?
So I do think we do. We have an awareness issue. In fact, it was very interesting because at the plenary, there was really a call for our president to have a family meeting about TB. The family meetings that we had for COVID was really, it was extremely well received. And the most important part of it was about it being one message for all South Africans, irrespective of your social standing. And we think that having our president, who's such a key figure, talk about TB, make it a reality, perhaps engage with some of the interventions on the TB recovery plan, like we have a TB health check, which allows you to screen through your cell phone. And just increasing our screening and awareness. We learned a lot of lessons from COVID, and I think it's time that we leverage these lessons in the TB program.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Really, really do appreciate it, Priyashni Pandit Subrayan. We lost Dr. Sibongiseni Tlomo due to load shedding, unfortunately. Terrible network there. That's why that call wasn't very clear. See what load shedding does. But thank you so much to Priyashni Pandit Subrayan, who is a technical TB director at the Aurum Institute. Thank you so much to you for listening. This brings us to the end of the show this week today. We're back with you next week, bringing conversations that are important to our democracy, to our lived experiences as South Africans and as global citizens. Let's continue the conversation on social media. It is at Oliver_speaking, Oliver Dickson on Facebook. At 7 o'clock, Thabiso Musua brings you the sports on the other side of the news all the way from Durban. And if you bump into him in the streets of Durban, please do tell him that I say the Springboks are winning. They're going to beat Argentina in excess of 20 points. Good night.
Independent and impartial. This is SAfm News.
Ramaphosa makes an appeal over Russia-Africa bill and 10 people killed in KZN crash. Good evening to you. President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on